My name is Clara, I'm 36, and I'm a woman who spent half her life believing that showing up was enough. Showing up for family dinners, showing up for financial crises, showing up for people who would never show up for me. The other half of my life, the better half, began precisely on a cold Tuesday afternoon in Asheville, North Carolina, which is exactly where my story starts. The crisp autumn air always smells like pine and wood smoke up in the Blue Ridge Mountains, a smell that used to mean safety, home, and the promise of a quiet life. That Tuesday, it smelled like rejection and the sudden, shocking scent of my own freedom. I was standing on the gravel driveway of the house I grew up in, a house Dad still calls his kingdom. I was holding a small black suitcase, the one I used for quick weekend visits, and watching it tumble end over end across the stones. Dad's arm, stiff and powerful even at 65, was still extended, his hand open where he had just launched my belongings with the kind of force you use to throw out garbage. The house stood silent behind him, its massive bay window reflecting the gray sky and my bewildered face. "Get off my property, Clara. I told you I don't want you here. Not you, not your guilt, and certainly not that lifestyle of yours. You think you can just waltz back into the easy life when your fancy city job gets difficult? No. The answer is no. This house is for family who understands what real family means." His face was a mask of cold, hard stone, the very same expression he used 20 years ago when he told me my aspirations were cute, but unrealistic. My stepmother, Diane, stood behind the sheer curtains, a shadow that never risked direct sunlight, but whose presence was as sharp as broken glass. I could feel her silent, triumphant smile cutting through the window pane. I looked down at the suitcase, then back up at the man who had raised me, the man I financially supported, quietly, shamefully, consistently, for the past 5 years. The shock wasn't that he rejected me. It was the sheer theatrical cruelty of the gesture. He had known I was coming. He had known I was counting on this brief sanctuary. I took a deep, shaky breath, not to cry, but to anchor the rage that was already beginning to settle deep in my bones. I was homeless, rejected, and holding a small bag of clothes, and I was about to become the most powerful woman my father had ever known. Before I tell you the specific, bone-chilling reason Dad decided, after all these years, that I was suddenly toxic enough to be thrown out like yesterday's leftovers, and trust me, it's a story of pure, unadulterated family delusion, I need to ask you something. If you've ever been tossed aside by the very people you built your life around, if you've ever had a parent choose a comfortable, petty lie over your actual truth, hit that like button. It tells me that my story is reaching the people who need to hear it most, and if you're brave enough, subscribe to the channel right now. You're going to want to be here to see what happens when the rejected daughter finally wins. I walked the 10 steps back to my rental car, a cheap red sedan that looked completely out of place next to Dad's gleaming black pickup. I picked up the suitcase, dusting off the tiny pebbles caught in the zipper. As I got into the car, I glanced back. Dad was still standing there, arms crossed, the victor of a battle no one else knew was being fought. He seemed satisfied, almost smug. He had enforced his boundary, asserted his dominance, and ensured that Clara, the problem, was gone. He had no idea that in throwing out my suitcase, he had thrown out his future. 5 hours, I remember thinking as I pulled out onto the winding mountain road. 5 hours from now, the whole world is going to look different. And I promise you, I will be the only one laughing. But to understand the weight of that 5-hour clock, you have to understand the dynamic that brought me back to Asheville in the first place, and the fragile, costly lie my father was desperately trying to maintain. It all started with my younger brother, Leo, and the family obsession with his image. Leo, 4 years my junior, was the golden son. He was everything I was not. Effortless, charming, and perpetually irresponsible. While I was in the city building my career as a senior analyst in global mergers and acquisitions, Leo was perfecting the art of the expensive mistake. Failed startups, questionable investments, and most recently, a massive unpayable debt tied to an incredibly poor decision regarding a local commercial property. Dad and Diane didn't see failure. They saw potential and bad luck. They saw a victim. I, meanwhile, was the cold, calculating daughter who never understood the importance of heart. That was the official family narrative, the one printed on the holiday cards they never sent me. My sin, the unforgivable one, was being successful without needing them. The debt Leo racked up wasn't trivial. It was crippling. It was the kind of money that threatened to take not just Leo's current life, but Dad's entire retirement nest egg, which was inextricably linked to the commercial property Leo had gambled with. For months, I had been the silent lifeline. Every month, a wire transfer left my corporate account and landed in Dad's private one, meticulously labeled loan repayment in my accounting software. I had been paying down Leo's colossal mistake under the pretense that Dad was selling off some old investments. Why did I do it? Because even though I was the rejected one, the fear of seeing my father lose everything, even if he deserved it, was a deeply ingrained reflex. It was the residual effect of a lifetime of seeking approval. I had come home this time not just for sanctuary, but to finalize a brutal agreement. I was prepared to pay off the final 70% of the debt, a 7-figure sum that would wipe out my savings and secure Dad's retirement, but only if he signed over a small, dilapidated cabin on the lake, a property of minimal value but immense sentimental worth to me, as collateral, a token of commitment. My collateral wasn't about the money. It was about ensuring that Leo would finally face the consequences of his actions, even if only through a symbolic loss of family favor. I wanted Dad to acknowledge just once that I was the one saving them. I wanted proof that my value transcended my bank account. The rejection was Dad's response to my condition. I hadn't even finished explaining the terms when he exploded. "You want to buy your way back into the family, Clara? Use Leo's misfortune as leverage? How dare you? You're trying to corner your own father. Get out! I don't need your blood money, and I don't need your cold heart trying to dictate terms in my house." The irony was a punch to the gut. He did need the money. He just couldn't handle the truth that the money came with a price. His pride. So he chose the grand gesture of rejection, the theatrical throwing of the suitcase, to protect his ego and maintain the illusion that he was still in control. He rejected my salvation because it was offered by the daughter he had spent a lifetime diminishing. It was a desperate act of self-preservation, a terrible gamble that he would find another, easier solution in the remaining 2 days before the bank called in the debt. I drove away, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the sun beginning its slow descent behind the jagged mountain peaks. I wasn't just driving away from my father's house. I was driving away from my past, my obligation, and my deepest, most expensive fear, the fear of being unloved. I had 2 days to find a solution for myself, but Dad had only 5 hours left. 5 hours until the phone call that would change everything, and it wasn't the bank calling him. I drove until the houses became sparser, the trees thicker, and the road familiar. I found myself instinctively pulling into the small parking lot of the Black Bear Diner, the place my grandmother used to take me after school. It was safe, anonymous, and smelled like burnt coffee and regret. Perfect. I ordered a terrible black coffee and a piece of pie I couldn't eat, setting my laptop on the scratched Formica table. I had exactly 4 hours and 58 minutes until 6 p.m. Eastern, the deadline I had set for myself. The money I was going to send to Dad was now mine again. My task was simple, brutal, and utterly necessary: secure my own future. I opened my professional email account, the one Dad didn't know existed, and drafted 3 separate emails. The first was to my managing director. I was resigning, effective immediately, not just from the firm, but from the entire soul-crushing high-stakes game. The second was to my broker: sell all assets, liquidate everything, wire the proceeds to a holding account in the Caymans. I was done with the life I had built to impress people who couldn't be impressed. The third email was the one that shook my hand, the one that defined the next 5 hours of my father's life. It was addressed to Marcus Thorne, the chief operating officer of Keystone Investments. Keystone wasn't just any investment firm. It was the financial shark currently circling the commercial property debt that threatened my father's retirement and Leo's entire future. Marcus Thorne was the man who had initiated the foreclosure proceedings. I knew Marcus because, for the past 4 years, I had been the anonymous consultant who provided him with the highly specific, unadvertised legal and financial loopholes that allowed Keystone to acquire distressed properties quietly and quickly. I was his secret weapon, his ghost analyst. I had done this for dozens of companies, building a quiet, immense personal fortune and reputation. It was a job I kept completely separate from my corporate role, a ruthless side hustle that paid for my loans to Dad. My email to Marcus was brief and devastating. Subject: termination of services. Body: effective immediately, I am withdrawing all consulting support for the Asheville commercial debt acquisition. Furthermore, I am informing you that the proprietary legal strategy you intended to use in the foreclosure proceedings contains a major, unmitigated flaw that will result in the entire case being dismissed. I advise immediate retraction of all current legal filings. You have precisely 5 hours to comply before I submit an affidavit detailing your flawed strategy to the opposing counsel. Do not call my corporate line. Contact me only at this burner number before 6 p.m. The power shifted instantly. I wasn't just a rejected daughter anymore. I was the bomb my father's potential savior was about to detonate. Marcus Thorne knew that without my expertise, the whole Keystone acquisition, a multi-million-dollar deal hinging on my secret loopholes, would crumble. He also knew I was deadly serious. The flaw I mentioned? It was real. A small error I intentionally built into my own strategy, a self-destruct mechanism I carried with me everywhere. I hit send at 1:07 p.m. The clock started ticking. My coffee was still untouched. The pie was starting to look cold and lonely. I sat there watching the minute hand creep towards 6 p.m., waiting for the only phone call that mattered. It wasn't about revenge. It was about forcing everyone, Dad, Leo, Marcus Thorne, and myself, to finally acknowledge the true source of power in the family, the one person they had all dismissed. The person sitting alone in a diner, holding the fate of an entire city block in her quiet, capable hands. The call came at 4:32 p.m., almost 2 hours before my deadline. The burner phone, cheap and disposable, screamed with a harsh, unfamiliar ring. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew the caller. I let it ring twice, then answered calmly. "Hello, Marcus." The voice on the other end was not the cool, predatory baritone of the COO I knew, but a strangled, high-pitched plea. "Clara, thank God. We need to talk. Right now. You can't do this. That strategy is critical. We've already sunk $10 million into that acquisition, and the dismissal? It will ruin us. Please, what are your terms? Name your price. We'll double the retainer. Triple it." I took a slow sip of my black coffee, finally tasting the bitter warmth. "My terms are simple, Marcus. I want the immediate, unconditional release of the Asheville commercial debt from all foreclosure proceedings. I want the debt marked as fully settled, zero balance, with all associated documentation notarized and sent to my private email within the next hour. No repayment, no acquisition, no strings. The debt simply vanishes." A horrible silence stretched across the line. Marcus was processing the scale of my demand. I wasn't asking for money. I was asking for a miracle for the very people who had just thrown me out. "Clara, that's insane. We can't just forgive a 7-figure debt. That's not how we operate." "It is how I operate, Marcus," I replied, my voice dangerously soft. "The flaw in the strategy, the one I told you about, it's not just a minor error. It compromises every single acquisition you've made in the last 3 years using my work. You choose. 1, debt disappears, or your entire portfolio collapses, and you face a major SEC inquiry. 5 hours. The clock is running. Choose quickly." He didn't argue. He couldn't. He knew I had the evidence, the documents, and the precise, cold logic to back up my claim. The entire empire he had built on my back was now resting on one phone call. Done. Consider the debt gone. But Clara, why? Why this debt? I simply laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Let's just say I decided to choose a new client. A client who has always deserved a clean slate. My terms stand, Marcus. Now, get to work. I hung up the phone and watched the clock. The entire process, the email, the terror, the settlement, took less than 4 hours. It was 5:02 p.m. The Asheville commercial debt, the one that threatened to bankrupt my father and ruin his carefully constructed facade of success, was now legally and irrevocably gone. Not paid by me, but forgiven by the shark circling his family. My father was safe. His kingdom was secured. And he didn't even know he had been saved. I got back into the red rental car and headed back up the winding road to the kingdom I had just saved. It was 5:58 p.m. when I pulled back into the gravel driveway. The air was getting darker and the porch light was on. I didn't even have to get out of the car. Dad was already standing in the doorway, but this time he wasn't crossing his arms. He was pacing, hands running through his gray hair, his face no longer set in stone, but crumpled with sheer, devastating panic. His shirt was untucked, his slippers were half off, and he looked every bit the frantic, cornered man I knew he was underneath the bluster. I rolled down the window and waited. He spotted me, and the pacing stopped dead. The man who had thrown my belongings out 5 hours earlier now stumbled toward the car, not walking, but running with the desperate, ungainly gait of a man who just received the most terrifying news of his life. He reached my window, bent down, and the words that tumbled out were barely recognizable as human speech. "Clara! Clara, you have to come back! You have to! It's Leo! It's the property! The bank! No, not the bank! It's Keystone! They called! They said the acquisition is off! They said the deal is collapsing and they're pulling all their financing immediately. They're going to bankrupt us by morning. They said their analyst quit. They said their whole strategy has a flaw and they're facing lawsuits. They said she knew everything and now she's gone. They said only you could possibly fix it. Please, I need you to look at the paperwork. You're the only one who understands the numbers. I know I was wrong. I was arrogant. I was blind. I was so scared I couldn't face the truth. Come back inside, please. I'll sign the cabin over. I'll sign anything. I'll tell Diane to leave. I'll tell Leo to take a bus. Just, please, my little girl. Don't let your old man lose everything. Don't let me lose the house." He was on his knees, actually kneeling in the gravel, his desperate eyes locked on mine. The irony was a perfectly chilled glass of water. He wasn't begging for me, Clara, his daughter. He was begging for the analyst, the cold, calculating woman he had rejected. He was begging for the one person who could save the kingdom he had just tried to banish her from. I looked at him, not with triumph, but with a quiet, devastating clarity. The desperation in his eyes wasn't love. It was pure financial terror. He didn't want me. He wanted my solution, and I was finally strong enough to see the difference. I let the silence hang there, heavy and cold, for a long minute. Then I slowly opened the car door. He watched, hopeful, as I stepped out, my small black suitcase still sitting on the passenger seat. I walked past him, toward the front door, the very door he had slammed in my face. He scrambled up, following me inside, his voice a frantic stream of apologies and promises. "I promise, Clara, I'll change. I'll listen. Just tell me what to do." Diane, now fully visible in the living room, was frozen, her triumphant smile replaced by a look of sheer horror as she watched me re-enter her carefully guarded domain. This was the moment of revenge. This was the moment I was supposed to unleash the full force of my power, to expose his lie, and to claim my victory. But the victory I had orchestrated was already complete. I stopped in the middle of the living room, directly under the massive, glittering chandelier. I looked at the man who was now standing, trembling, waiting for his sentence. "Dad?" I said, my voice cutting through the panic like a diamond on glass. "The debt is gone. Keystone Investments called because they settled the debt. They pulled out. They decided they didn't want the property anymore. They did this at 5:02 p.m. You are safe. Leo is safe. Your house is safe." The information hit him like a physical blow. His face went slack, cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally a slow, dawning comprehension. But why? Why would they just let it go? I walked over to the bay window, the one that had reflected my rejection earlier, and pointed at the mountain view. "It doesn't matter why they let it go, Dad. What matters is that they did. You're saved. Not by me. Not by Leo. By some anonymous miracle you don't understand and will never be able to repay." I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle on him. Diane was clutching her throat. I had not only saved the house, but I had also stolen the credit, leaving the entire rescue a mystery, a divine intervention he couldn't control or leverage. The true moment of change wasn't the announcement of the debt cancellation. It was what happened next. I turned back to him, reaching into my coat pocket and pulling out a single, crisp legal document. It wasn't the deed to the cabin. It was my resignation letter, formally notarized from my corporate job, The job that had been the foundation of my entire financial life. The money he secretly respected. Dad, I came here for sanctuary. I came here to ask for one small, meaningless, sentimental thing in exchange for saving your entire life. You threw my suitcase out because my existence challenged your narrative of who you are and who I should be. You chose your pride over my need. I saved you not because you deserved it, but because I needed to free myself from the obligation I felt to you. I held the resignation letter up. I quit my job today. I'm done being the person who fixes other people's emergencies. I'm done building a life to impress the people who only value the solution I provide, and never the woman who provides it. I laid the resignation letter gently on the coffee table. You don't need me to fix the debt, it's fixed. And I don't need the cabin. I don't need anything from you anymore. The price of my return was always your admission that I was worthy of love and respect, not just utility. And you just proved on your knees that you only value the utility. He looked from the document to me, and for the first time in his life, his arrogance vanished. He didn't see an analyst. He saw the daughter he had just risked losing forever, only to have her return, save him, and then choose to walk away on her own terms. The tears that finally rolled down his cheeks were not of fear, but of profound, searing regret. He reached out his hand, but I gently stepped back. I'm not coming back to live here, Dad. I'm leaving Asheville tonight. I'm going to build a new life, a life where I'm the hero, not the perpetual lifeguard. Clara, please, he whispered, his voice broken. Just tell me what I have to do. I see it now. I see what I've done. I smiled, a genuine, sad but powerful smile. The only thing you have to do, Dad, is live with the mystery of who saved you, and remember the day you chose to throw out your own salvation. But you have your chance now. You have your house, your retirement, and a clean slate. Use it to finally be a better man, and maybe, just maybe, be a father to Leo that doesn't constantly enable him. That's the only return I need. I picked up my little black suitcase from the floor where I had dropped it. I walked out of the house and back to my car, leaving the two figures frozen in the living room. I didn't feel rage or bitter triumph. I felt a quiet, absolute sense of closure. The revenge wasn't in the exposure, but in the silent, irreversible choice to walk away after saving them. I had given him the gift of his future back, but taken back my own, showing him that I was the prize he had permanently lost. As I drove away, the mountain air felt cooler, cleaner. I was leaving my family's drama behind, driving east toward a life that was entirely my own, unburdened by loans, obligations, or the toxic need for approval. My last act wasn't vengeance. It was an act of grace on my terms, forcing a path to a better life for him without allowing him to drag me down. He was alive, safe, and now faced with the devastating, quiet knowledge of my true worth, a knowledge that would force him, slowly, painfully, to change. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the lights of Asheville twinkling, a city I no longer owed anything to. I was officially free, and that freedom, paid for with 5 hours of strategic silence, was the most beautiful, most unexpected ending I could have ever written for myself. What do you think? Was my decision to walk away after saving him the ultimate form of power, or should I have stayed to demand my respect? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective helps me process everything that happened that unforgettable Tuesday.